Module 2. Exports. Which agencies are responsible for implementing controls on arms exports?
The U.S. National Control System is a very elaborate and complicated system. It's more complicated than most people's are. So although we like to think that we have the gold standard for the system, we don't actually wish to inflict our system on everybody else because it's much more complicated than what they need to have. Because as the largest arms exporter in the world, we also have a great deal of responsibility for what we do, and we need to have a strong and effective national control system. One of the umbrella laws is the Arms Export Control Act, but there are a series of laws and also regulations. Well, the U.S. National Control System requires that for you to import or export conventional arms, you actually have to have a license and authorization, and it's very detailed and very cumbersome. But we think it's effective. The United States believes that its export control system is already fully consistent with the obligations of the treaty. That the system that we already had in place before we started the negotiation is fully compliant with all the obligations, and all that we have to do to comply with the requirements of the treaty is actually to submit the reporting to the treaty, the reporting on the national control system and then on the actual authorizations and items transferred. But we didn't have to change our system at all because we've assessed that it's compliant with the requirements and obligations of the treaty.
There's quite a number of them that are involved, ranging from Defense Department, the Department of Foreign Affairs, State Security, the Police Service, as well as the Department of Trade and Industry. So those are departments basically involved in the arms transfer process. Well, it's basically the Department of Foreign Affairs, obviously supported by the Arms Control Authority.
Is the relevant legislation located online?
The two places to start with in terms of getting this kind of information from the U.S. side is probably in the State Department, the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, and the website for the Directorate of Defense Trade Controls, or DDTC, because they handle the commercial side of the arms exports, or to go over to the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Standards, or BIS is the acronym for it, where they have a series of websites there with information on this as well.
Well, it is publicly available. It is on a website, and you can get that from any government department that handles this kind of document. So it's a publicly available document. Well, in South Africa, we've got what is called the Government Printing Works, which basically handles all documents of government in terms of printing. But at the same time, all government departments that have got a role to play with regard to the arms transfer authorization will have access to this particular documentation.
Does your state's legislation or regulations outline the measures to ensure that authorizations are detailed and issued prior to export? What are the measures?
It's largely a national process, but it therefore benefits from inputs from our regional partners or any other person who seeks to buy weapons from South Africa. As an example, if there are certain regional initiatives on a particular thing, that would be part of our consideration process before a decision is made. But final decision is a national discretion, and as such, therefore, we take into account quite a number of factors. But at the end of it all, it's the discretion of South Africa that prevails.
How does your state fulfill its record-keeping obligations under the ATT? Does it keep records of authorizations and exports?
In the sense that before you can get a license, there is a particular set of information we have to provide, ranging from the objectives for which you buy the weapons, right up to assurances we have to provide, as well as undertakings about the future use of the weapons. So basically there is a whole set of information that we have to provide before a decision is made. Well, we are required by national legislation to keep records for a particular period of time. Currently, it's about 8 years with respect to arms. However, we are intending to amend that to ensure that it is aligned with the record-keeping period of the ATT.
Can the records be accessed to inform future decisions on authorizations?
Well, when we report data to Wassenaar and to the UN Register, we report on the actual items transferred to it. We collect information on both authorizations and on actual items transferred because under those two things, as I said, we actually have to report on the actual items transferred, but we also report to Congress on authorization. So we collect information on both sides of the equation. We make it available to other states through the Wassenaar arrangement or to the UN Register, but then the congressional reporting that we do in the 655 report and various other things, that's all publicly available information. Well, as the largest arms exporter in the world, it's not easy for it. We have an elaborate control system which we use for it, but we have, depending on the year that you're talking about, somewhere between 40 and as much as 60% of the international arms trade in terms of on the export side at least. So we have to collect the data, and collecting the data, I know from personal first-hand experience with the UN Register, for example, that we break the data into commercial sales and government-to-government transfers, and on the government-to-government transfers to collect that data, we have to go to as many as 35 different offices to actually collect the data because although we prepare these reports, we don't actually have a central repository with all this information automatically brought into one place. And for some of the smaller or countries with smaller exports, and it might be easier for them to do this, but we have the responsibility spread over a number of different agencies. So we have to go to those agencies to get the data from them.
It's kept in different forms. Basically, there are hard copies of the information. It's based or it's included in our database, which is electronic. And as such, therefore, before any decision could be made on arms transfers, we run a profile on the country that we wish to sell to. And as such, therefore, we have access to about everything that we have on that particular country.
Can the records be easily retrieved for reporting?
We make it available to other states through the Wassenaar arrangement or to the UN Register, but then the congressional reporting that we do in the 655 report and various other things, that's all publicly available information.
Given the current obligations that we have of reporting, firstly to Parliament as well as to Cabinet, so for us, retrieving the information is not difficult at all because the information is readily available and we are doing reporting all the time. So to fulfill our reporting requirements under the ATT would not present an enormous challenge.
In order to explain how states fulfill their ATT commitments with regards to the establishment and maintenance of an export control system, states must provide information on export control legislation. This may be a single act and related secondary legislation and policy guidelines, or a range of different laws. Competent national authorities or agencies designated as responsible for implementing controls on arms exports. States take different approaches to fulfilling this obligation, and it can include a single ministry or a specialized agency responsible for export controls. In some cases, it can be an interministerial committee. The authorization process. States must take measures to ensure that all authorizations for the export of conventional arms covered under Article 2(1) or of items covered under Article 3 or Article 4 are detailed and issued prior to the export. And record keeping for transfer authorizations and/or actual exports. The ATT only provides an indicative list of information that could be included in such records, so it's useful to show what information is retained in your national records. Good record keeping is useful for conducting risk assessments and also important for enabling the compilation of annual reports on arms export authorizations or actual exports. Of course, an effective and transparent export control system is essential for implementing Articles 6 and 7 of the ATT on prohibitions and risk assessment, which are dealt with in Guidance Notes 6 and 7.